Yo, yo.
What up, guys? My name's Chef Boyarbeatz.
And I am Contra.
And we're doing a little track breakdown of our new tune, Night Lurker.
Yeah.
We're just going to play it from the top, and then we'll go through a little bits and pieces.
Whoa. Oh no, CPU. You just keep going, press spacebar.
Ready for this? I'm gonna get it out.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it there. Obviously we got the second drop, but yeah, I guess we'll do a little rundown. So basically I cruised over to Joey's house and yeah, basically just kind of started a little foundation by myself and just made a simple beat and yeah, looked for some. At the time I was like super into like kind of the funk style hip-hop vocals, and I'd recently just downloaded this pack and yeah, just came across this cool little vocal here. I was actually a little unsure of it at first, and it's funny, I remember like waiting for Joey, like your approval or whatever to see if it was you know, up to standards or whatever. And yeah, fucking just
it's a money vocal.
Yeah, he was down with it, and it's crazy how that one decision kind of like transformed the whole tune. And we like, yeah, just kind of based, like the basses are quite similar to like the, I guess the tonalities and the notes of the actual, and like the rhythm.
Yeah, we basically took the melody or whatever of the vocal and just kind of like by ear put into MIDI. And then the first drop, the beginning of the first drop is from the Moog. So he brought his Moog over to my house and just kind of sat there and recorded stuff for like 10 minutes. And so we don't have the actual original patch for that first bass. Also, I use Ableton and he uses Logic, so we were going back and forth on this. If you can pull up the first bass.
Yeah, let's see.
But
this huge
basically
project.
what it's from, I believe I did like 2 saw waves with basically a saw going up the opposite direction, so it was like a slow attack essentially, and basically did that, matched it to like the filter and did a lot of resonance to kind of get like that squelchy kind of sound almost. And within like 2 or 3 minutes, we basically got the bass patch in the recording.
Pretty quick how we ended up getting it. It was nuts.
Yeah, so play that just by itself.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty simple. As far as processing goes, I didn't do too much crazy stuff.
I know we did some stuff on Ableton too, because
Oh,
like by
yeah.
itself, it sounds cool, but like there wasn't a lot of low end to it, so we ended up having to like layer all the patches in here. We layered like a clean sub underneath, but we definitely had to like brighten it up a little bit too, because like one thing I've noticed when recording stuff with the Moog is if you like are trying to play it side by side with like soft synths in the DAW, you kind of got to brighten it up a little bit. It's just the stuff that you can get from like Serum, and it just sounds so clean and
Yeah,
has
it's
so
a
much
lot
high end
more high-end
content.
For sure. Moog's missing a lot of the
Yeah.
high-end information, I've noticed for sure. But it's very rich in like the mid harmonics.
Yeah,
I really like
and it's
the
just
Moog.
fun to fucking turn knobs and
Yeah,
not be like trying to create something specifically. You're just like, what can I fuck around and record in 20 minutes or so, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do anything too crazy. Just threw a little decapitator. Just has some nice rich harmonics for saturation. I really love this plugin. Nice sound toys. And we did a compressor in Logic. Just it's kind of like an analog emulation compressor. Adds a little more warmth. Some more saturation. I think I might have boosted, some of the high end here, kind of to bring it out a bit. Did Side Widener, which is like my favorite stereo plugin. It has like very little phase correlation issues, and it just really widens mid basses.
Nice.
I really like the sound. Add a little bit of transient to make it pop a bit out of the mix, just some attack. Then it looks like I threw a little bit of chorus here, just to kind of emphasize the mids. This plugin's really great. It has like an EQ band and stuff. And then I threw this analog EQ emulation, more warmth and more brightness here.
I haven't used that one in a while.
Yeah, this one's sick. I use it quite often instead of adding in FabFilter.
Yeah.
And then I think it looks like we probably had some resonant frequencies issue here, so I just kind of tamed those. And then good old K-clip to kind of
Chop it off.
Get a little bit of loudness and get rid of those transient peaks, which it doesn't look too bad, but
No, it looks
it
pretty
also
good.
adds a little bit of color too with this specific plugin, which is nice. And then just an EQ, rolled off the lows to fit in the sub bass. Generally I try to go to around, I mean, you kind of have to look at visually, but generally it's around like 60 to like 80 hertz, I'd say. I'm doing a high shelf cut. And I mean, that's pretty much it. And then I just have my mid bass chain here. I don't know, it's pretty simple. It's mostly just compression there and a little bit of limiting, another EQ, fresh air, brighten it up a little bit more. So pretty simple stuff. And then
the second one was actually another patch that I made in Operator in Ableton. This is an old project that we had, and as you can see, none of the samples are there, unfortunately. But we have the bass patches. So we kind of talked about how the initial patch here was made on the Moog, so we can't really show you exactly how that was made, unfortunately, but we have the B and C sections here. So for the B section here, good old Operator. And I was actually trying to copy kind of a similar patch to the Moog that I had done, and got a just good old square wave down here. And I don't know if you didn't know this, these are all different types of routing. So if you have it set to this one, you'll have your first oscillator here, and then any of these oscillators afterwards would be FMing it. Whereas if you had it set to here, they're all running in parallel. So this would be running out, this would be running out, this would be running out, and they would all combine for one sound, essentially. Not that that's related to this patch specifically, but just figured I'd say that for anybody out there who didn't know what that is. Anyway, so the core of the sound was, for this one at least, was kind of an up-ramped saw wave with an LFO on the filter, which is kind of what we did here for the other patch. This was just kind of like to add on to the sound after adding some extra harmonics. So we kind of did the same thing here, but instead of having the filter like go up slowly and have a slow attack, we just had it have a really quick attack, so it's more of like a stabby kind of sound.
Yeah, so there's some nice contrast to it, because I felt like if it was the same sort of movement, it wouldn't be as interesting. So
Yeah.
I feel like it really stood out from that first A section.
Yeah. So, and as you can see by the automation, we kind of had it ramp up a little bit over time, give it some dynamics, so it's not so static. Let's play real quick. So yeah, usually I use OTT a lot to kind of bring out the sound if it's not like, if it doesn't have as much harmonics or as much like mids and highs that I would like. So like, this is what it sounds like without it. Sounds kind of dull, not as bright. Really adds a lot to it. And usually I'll like take out the lows there. That way it's not doing that, because otherwise you kind of have to like mix the levels in a little bit more. And it's just like, if you're cutting out the lows anyway, you might as well just cut it out there too. Got a good old high pass at 100 hertz, some saturation. And then here's where it gets a bunch of the extra sound too. So we basically just did what is happening here on this filter again after adding some extra harmonics and stuff. So again, it's opening up slowly over time. Got a sharp resonance, which is kind of what we had in this patch as well on the Moog. I just remember doing, I like to do a lot of resonance in my patches, just kind of get that little squelchy kind of sound. So here's it without it. Ew. Yeah.
Kind of makes it bubbly sounding.
Yeah, yeah. And as you can see, the shape is the same thing as this patch over on the operator over here. It's really short and quick and stabby. It's got a very short attack versus the other one, which had a longer attack. And here we just got some reverb. It's not on this one. But I usually use Valhalla's Vintage Reverb a lot, and usually I'll have a rack that's already made that has this setup essentially. So I got just a clean, dry signal, and then usually a reverb signal that I'll mix into taste, and then yeah, usually do that.
Yeah, Valhalla Vintage Verb is nice. I feel like it's really rich and quite realistic sounding too, and it's great. It has a lot of parameters that you can control, which is nice, especially like the width knob is really good, especially for mid basses.
Yeah, definitely my go-to pretty much. And then this is, again, can't see it, but I had a second reverb. So this reverb I had for like a room essentially to kind of give it some space, but had a very short decay on it. And then this one, I put a very long decay, and I automated this to kind of like increase the tail over time so that it would kind of like sound like it's swelling almost. And especially right here where it kind of ends here, it'll like, it swells out and there's just a fat reverb tail right here during this bass fill right here.
Yeah, it almost makes it so you don't necessarily need a riser too.
Yeah.
A good substitute
Yeah.
instead.
And then this just little bass fill we got here. This was, so again, how I mentioned earlier, how this is like in parallel. So if you had it like this patch wouldn't work the way it does, because this is a detuned square wave. And if you had this set up like this, this would be FMing this essentially. Whereas if you did this, here, I'll play it so you can hear what I'm talking about. So this is how it sounds normally. Like the classic detuned square versus this. Completely different sounds. Yeah, usually I love that kind of detuned square sound. And usually you can get that just by detuning. Serum, you detune both of them, whereas this one you just detune the second one usually. But you usually go in between like 20 to 40 semitones, and you can get that like detuned sound if you're looking for square or saw waves to do that. Again, pretty simple processing. Just did same high pass, saturation, reverb, yada yada yada. All right, the last sound that we had here in this first drop So pretty standard FM from B patch. This is like my bread and butter. So usually I'll start with sine wave here, and then do a second sine wave, but you turn the level down here. Otherwise it won't like trigger it properly. And you'll basically do FM from B, which means this is FMing this. And usually around here is like that sweet spot for like getting the harmonics that you want without like overdoing it. Because if you like bring it up here, kind of sounds like shit.
And you
Yeah.
should let them know we're adjusting the octaves too, right?
Yes. Yeah. So the octaves really like kind of help determine the sound too. So like if you have it at 0. And then also this guy right here, I put it a fifth up because I thought it sounded better like that, and it gave it some extra harmonics that just an octave wouldn't. Completely different sound right there. But yeah, I just did some LFO, automating the volume, this filter right here, a little bit of drive, put the resonance up, and FX. Usually I'll do, this is like my go-to like kind of processing for this too. Usually I have this at like 2 or 3%, just give it some width, but I didn't on this one. This side I did on the hyper. Distortion, did a little tube. EQing, I think I just did that because I was just kind of fucking around trying to find a sweet spot to kind of get some like extra resonance down in that low end right there. And then good old multiband. Usually I don't like tweak this too much. I'll just like push the gain up and then have the release all the way up. That way it's like not immediately coming back down. It's kind of like having a withstanded like over compression essentially. Yeah. And then just again, same thing on the oscillator up or the filter up here. It's basically kind of doing the same thing after adding all these harmonics and extra buffer to it, just bringing the filter back down and automating it. That it's kind of like the same thing that we did with the patch that I just showed you. Where did he go? This guy. So same thing after like adding all of this shit and then filtering it again. That's basically the same thing what we're doing with all of this. Same thought process essentially. Kind of like buffing the sound up and then bringing the filter back down to kind of like
Another low pass
filter it out. Yeah. So like if you didn't have that on, you can kind of hear how like it kind of, I don't know what the word would be, but it sounds a lot better. Sounds very, very way more louder. No. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of those patches. Like it's pretty simple synthesis stuff.
And then I guess I should say where I got these samples too, since I'm sure some people are curious. So I'm a big fan of Your Mom's House podcast. It's like a couple comedians. They do this show on the YouTubes, and they feature this. They basically like post all these like ridiculous characters and like kind of comment on him. So there's this one guy that stood out, and his name is Unk Shine, and he's just a big old rascal and just has the most ridiculous fucking voice. And that's where the I came from. Just a little bit of comedy. I felt like it was kind of a sillier tune, so we could kind of like fit in some like playful energy.
Yeah.
Drums and stuff.
All right, so drums, yeah.
So yeah, I'll give you a little rundown here. Like I said, it kind of just started the foundation of this tune originally, and it kind of led us to create these womps. But yeah, I was originally trying to create something that was a little bit gritty and lo-fi to kind of match the funk vocals. Also, yeah, let's see. I'll just play it through here. So yeah, pretty simple. I mean, I'm really sample based with a lot of my stuff. So just, finding good packs and dragging and dropping, doing a little bit of processing here and there, but just got some simple kicks. We got some kind of more lo-fi analog sounding snares. We used some spring reverb, I believe it looks like. Let's see.
Yeah, one of my go-to moves with like the spring reverb is like either taking the same sample and pitching it down like 12 or like an octave or 2 octaves, and then throwing the spring reverb on it, and you can get some like completely different tones, but it's like still the same kind of sample almost, so it like still works. Or
I think you were using Ableton Spring.
Yeah,
reverb,
yeah,
right?
I was using the convolution, although I just bought the Springs.
Springs is
sample,
sick.
or the,
Yeah, I think we
the
used
thing.
a little bit of both.
Yeah.
From my knowledge, I think
But-
we used.
Yeah, you can do that, or just like throw in different samples and like pitch them down and stuff, or like cut how long the sample of the spring you're doing, so it's kind of like a send essentially, but like it's not getting like the entire sample hit, it's just like getting like the transient, you know. And my go-to too is like for those is like you can't really like switch the preset to get different hits, so like what we'll do is like have 3 or 4 different channels all playing like different types of spring reverb, so you're getting like different hits every single time like you would with a real spring reverb.
Definitely. And let's see, it's a pretty basic kick and snare throughout. I know that we did some sort of like almost like shuffly shaker like during some parts. That's almost like your signature. I feel like,
I use the think break. I have one of the samples that's just like the shaker essentially, and I usually use it as like the second section or whatever to really like drive the drums.
We did a bit of fill work too. I really am a big fan of just like having little intricate. I find a lot of the times with bass music, sometimes the drums can be very repetitive. So I like throwing like little fills at the end of phrases just to kind of catch the listeners, the listener's attention a bit more. So I think right here we did something like that, and then processing's really simple. I don't have to do much. Once again, we kind of wanted like this lo-fi-ness. It was just all about finding kind of the right samples.
Yeah, getting drums right is like 90% of it is finding good samples from the get-go. Like if you're trying to process them, like if you're trying to do too much, it's usually a shit sample, and it's like I've always kind of gone by the idea that you can't polish a turd.
Indeed.
Like you can brighten stuff up and stuff, but like if the timbre or whatever of it doesn't like fit the tune, like it's not gonna fit. You know what I mean? And like you could try like layering and stuff, but like, and it's definitely something a lot of people do. But like you can also, there's a million samples out there. Like you could just find the right sample and like do a lot less work.
Yeah, it's really just all about doing some sample digging. Really, luckily I've taken. Over the years, I've just been able to get a good crate of drums, and I find that's it's really important since it's dance music, and you want a good beat behind it, right? So yeah, there's just another one. I feel like that's your little signature too. You use that one a lot.
Yeah, I do. I usually do like a dub
like-
echo on like a fill, and it'll kind of just like echo out. And there's actually a preset in Ableton called dub echo, and it's really fucking fire. Yeah, definitely highly recommend using that.
And then I think just like a simple ride here to kind of sustain some
Yeah,
energy.
so I did that in Ableton too. So what I've been doing recently is there's if you take auto pan in Ableton and you change it from, I forget what the knob is, but you can basically change it from an auto pan to like to a volume shaper essentially. Yeah, and I just made like the time of it like really quick, but I didn't do the amount too much. I probably did like 20 or 30% amount, so it's like kind of got like a nice vibrato on that. And I've been doing that recently on my rides to kind of give it like
It almost
little
makes
bit
it
more
sound
movement.
like it's a little bit distorted
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
I don't know. It
Yeah.
sits really nicely over the mid basses, and I feel like it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't overpower the mids a bit. It's
Yeah.
a little bit more subtle in the background. And yeah, once again, kind of like the drum fills and like having little fills at the end of phrases just to catch the listener's attention. I also like doing, some ear candy and stuff. Especially with a tune like this where, we're kind of going slightly, a little bit comic, a little bit of, I guess, more humor to it. So we just did some fun little samples. and you know, the cliche fucking dub laser too. Gotta throw one of those in. We did like an air horn here. Did some fun little chopping. Let's see what else we got going. You know, another little air horn siren thing. Some more effects. Yeah, I don't know, just nerding out. Just like
I'm gonna
all
get
the
it
small
out.
little details that I feel like really kind of polish up the tune and make it more interesting.
Yeah, it really fills it out. It takes it from like 80 to 90% done to like finished.
Yeah, and then good old Unk Shines.
I'm gonna get it out.
I love that guy. And yeah, I mean, as far as it's mostly just EQ and delay, you know, maybe
And
some
reverb, yeah.
reverb.
Just like
Nothing crazy.
making sure you're not using reverb too much, and like making sure there's like one or two things that are, if you are going to use reverb, because like otherwise that space that it creates is like not there. Because it's like if you're always having like a massive reverb in the background, like when you do reverb, it's not going to like change the mix at all. It's not going to give you depth. But if you don't have like massive reverb going on, and then you do put like a tail on something, it's gonna like, you'll be able to hear the depth in it and like it trailing out essentially. Same with like echo and delay, like it helps create that depth in the mix.
Yeah, kind of giving some sort of artificial space.
Yeah.
For sure. It's a fine line, though. You definitely don't want to reverb too much stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
'Cause then you can really muddy up the mix. And just got to kind of try to figure out what's important. And then, yeah, I mean, for that drop, the pre-drop thing, I just felt like it needed... It kind of had this, like, hood... It had, like, this hood vocal, and I'm like, fuck, what would be... I kind of like to tell a little bit of a story when I make my music. I think it's more exciting for the listener. So I just try to kind of envision something in my head. And obviously with this, it's like these ghetto funk samples. So I'm like thinking, oh, maybe a little gun reload could be sick. Or like that Nokia, like that little Nokia beat is really common in funk stuff as well. So yeah, just two simple samples. I felt like it kind of worked as like it's a nice little fill right before all the energy at the drop. Let's see. Wrong area here.
Creeping like a stalker, come to rip you off up in the...
Yeah, there you have it. That's pretty much it. Yeah, and that was a tune.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. And yeah, stoked to get this tune out finally. All right, peace.